Friend, I want you to think about the last time you checked your phone for news that still hasn't come. Maybe it's the job offer. Maybe it's the test results. Or the reply to a message you sent 3 days ago that you've now read back to yourself a dozen times, looking for hidden meaning in a sentence that was never that complicated. You check and there's nothing. You check again an hour later, just in case. Still nothing. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from waiting on something you can't control and can't rush. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself the way a crisis does. It just sits there, low and constant, humming underneath everything else you're doing. The meetings, the errands, the small talk, while some part of you is still standing at a locked door, waiting for it to open. Maybe you've started to wonder if you missed something, if you prayed wrong or waited wrong, or if God simply moved on to someone else's request while yours sat untouched in the queue. That's the loneliest part of delay, not just the waiting itself, but the fear that the waiting means you've been forgotten or passed over. You've probably noticed how other people's timelines seem to move so much faster than yours. Somebody younger gets the promotion. Somebody who started praying about this after you already has the answer. You try not to compare, and then you catch yourself doing it anyway at 11 at night, scrolling through a life that looks nothing like the stalled-out version of yours. Here's what I want to put in front of you tonight. What feels like a closed door to you might already be swinging open in a room you can't see into yet. What feels like silence from heaven might actually be the sound of God working with his sleeves rolled up before the part you're allowed to witness even begins. Delay is not the same thing as absence. Today, we're going to walk through 5 truths that prove it. We'll look at 5 people who waited, some for years, some for decades, before they ever saw the thing God had promised them. Every one of them felt exactly what you're feeling right now, and every one of them discovered, often only in hindsight, that God had already been moving long before anything changed on the surface. 5 truths, 5 stories, and then a prayer to help you actually rest in the waiting instead of just gritting your teeth through it. The first truth is that a promise from God does not expire just because years pass before it's fulfilled. Abram was 75 years old when God first told him in Genesis 12 that he would become a great nation. God repeated the promise again in Genesis 15, this time specifying a son who would come from your own body. Genesis 15:6 tells us Abram's response. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. Believing it, though, didn't make it arrive any faster. Years kept passing. Abram and his wife Sarai tried to help the promise along their own way through Sarai's servant Hagar. And that shortcut created heartache that echoes through the rest of Scripture. Still, no son of promise came. God renewed the covenant again in Genesis 17, giving Abram and Sarai new names, Abraham and Sarah, and telling them, specifically this time, that Sarah herself would bear the child within the year. Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughed at the idea, according to Genesis 18:12, because by any human calculation, it was absurd. She was 90. Genesis 21:5 finally gives us the number that closes the whole account. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. 25 years from the first promise to the baby in Sarah's arms. 25 years of aging, of doubting, of trying to manufacture the answer themselves, of watching their bodies grow less and less capable of producing the very thing God said they would produce. And yet, the promise had never once lapsed. It had simply been waiting on a timeline God never fully disclosed to them. They named the boy Isaac, which means laughter, because the same impossibility that once made Sarah laugh in disbelief became, 25 years later, the reason for genuine joy. Think about what those 25 years actually looked like day to day. There were no visible signs of progress most mornings. Sarah kept aging. The land God promised them still belonged to other people. If you'd interviewed Abraham in year 12 or year 18, he likely would have told you honestly that nothing seemed to be moving at all. The delay wasn't a sign the promise had failed. It was simply the ordinary, uneventful middle of a story whose ending hadn't been reached yet. The second truth is that the years that feel wasted and hidden are often the exact years God is using to prepare you for what's coming. Moses fled Egypt as a wanted man after killing an Egyptian overseer, arriving in Midian with nothing, no title, no army, no plan. Exodus 2:21 tells us simply that he was content to dwell there, and he married Zipporah, the daughter of the priest Jethro. Exodus 3:1 picks the story back up with Moses keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, which is a striking demotion for a man who had once been raised in Pharaoh's own household. He tended sheep in that wilderness for 40 years, according to Acts 7:30, before the day he noticed a bush that burned but was not consumed. 40 years is not a short detour. It is most of an adult lifetime. Moses learned the water sources of that desert, the terrain, the seasonal patterns of the wilderness. The very geography he would later lead an entire nation of Israelites through for another 40 years after the burning bush. None of that knowledge was wasted. It was quiet, invisible training for an assignment Moses didn't yet know he was going to receive. If you feel like your current season is just tending sheep in obscurity, take heart. Some of the most important preparation of your life doesn't look like anything at all from the outside. Consider, too, the man Moses was when he arrived in Midian compared to the man who left it. He fled Egypt as a fugitive who solved problems with his own hands, striking down an Egyptian in a moment of rage. 40 years later, he returned as someone who argued with God about his own inadequacy rather than charging ahead on confidence alone. The wilderness didn't just teach him geography. It stripped away the impulsiveness that got him exiled in the first place and left behind a humility he would need for the next 40 years of leading a stubborn, complaining nation through an actual desert. The third truth is that sometimes God asks us to stop striving and simply watch him move, because the breakthrough is already happening before we can perceive it. After the exodus from Egypt, the Israelites found themselves trapped, with Pharaoh's chariots closing in behind them and the Red Sea blocking every way forward. Panic set in immediately. Moses answered them with words recorded in Exodus 14:13-14. "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." Stand firm and be silent, not exactly the instructions you'd expect in a life or death emergency. But look at what Exodus 14:21 tells us happened next. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, while the people stood there terrified, unable to see any path forward. God was already parting the water in the darkness, one gust at a time, hours before the sun rose on a dry path through the middle of the sea. The miracle didn't begin the moment they saw it. It had been underway the entire time they thought nothing was happening. Picture the actual scene for a moment. Children crying, livestock panicking, the dust cloud of Pharaoh's approaching chariots visible on the horizon, and no path forward that any of them could see with their own eyes. From where the people stood, it must have felt like the very last hour of their lives. And yet the wind was already blowing. The sea floor was already drying beneath the surface, hour by hour, long before a single Israelite set foot on dry ground. Fear and the miracle were happening at the exact same time. They simply couldn't see the second one yet. The fourth truth is that God's timing operates on a fixed, appointed schedule, even when that schedule is completely invisible to us. The prophet Habakkuk was troubled by the violence and injustice he saw all around him in Judah, and he brought his complaint straight to God, then physically climbed his watchtower to wait for an answer. Habakkuk 2:1 says, "I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me." God's answer, when it came, wasn't immediate relief. It was a command to write down a vision and wait for it. Habakkuk 2:3 records it plainly. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Notice the tension in that sentence. It might seem slow. It will not actually be late. Those two things can both be true of your situation right now. It may feel unbearably slow from where you're standing, while still arriving at precisely the moment God already set for it, long before you started watching for it. It's worth noting Habakkuk didn't get a date. He got a command to keep watching and a promise that the appointed time was real, fixed, and already decided, even if it wasn't disclosed to him. That's a harder kind of faith than waiting for a countdown clock. It's trusting an appointment you can't see on any calendar, kept by someone whose sense of timing has never once failed. Even on the nights his silence made it feel otherwise. The fifth truth is that God's provision during a season of waiting often comes daily in exactly enough measure rather than all at once. During a severe famine, the prophet Elijah was sent to a widow in Zarephath who had almost nothing left. 1 Kings 17:12 records her own words. She had only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug, enough for one final meal for herself and her son before she expected them both to starve. Elijah asked her to make him bread first, with a promise attached in verse 14. "The jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth." She obeyed, and verse 16 tells us exactly what happened. The flour and oil lasted, day after day, for the length of the entire famine. Not a warehouse delivered overnight. Not a lifetime supply dropped at her door all at once. Just enough, every single day, for as long as the waiting lasted. If your provision looks smaller than you hoped for, smaller than a full and final answer, it may simply be daily bread, rather than a lifetime's worth delivered early. And that jar was never meant to run dry before its appointed day either. Notice, too, what the widow had to do each day to receive it. She had to go back to the jar again. She couldn't hoard 3 weeks' worth of flour in advance and stop trusting God in between. The provision required daily dependence, not a single act of faith she could coast on for the rest of the famine. That's an uncomfortable kind of provision if you'd rather have certainty locked in for good. But it's also the kind that keeps you returning to God every single morning instead of just once. Let's bring these 5 together. Abraham and Sarah waited 25 years for a promise that never actually lapsed, even while their own bodies argued against it. Moses spent 40 hidden years shepherding in Midian, quietly being shaped for an assignment he couldn't yet see coming. Israel stood trembling at the Red Sea while God was already parting the water in the dark, hours before they saw any evidence of it. Habakkuk climbed his watchtower and learned that an answer can be both slow and perfectly on time. And the widow of Zarephath discovered that God's provision can arrive daily, in small portions, without ever actually running out. Delay, in every one of these stories, was never the absence of God's activity. It was simply the part of his activity we weren't yet allowed to see. 25 years, 40 years, one long night, an appointed time on a calendar no one could read, and a jar that got refilled every single morning. 5 completely different timelines, and the same God faithfully at work behind every one of them. Now let us pray. Bring the specific door you're still waiting on tonight, the answer, the healing, the reunion, and lay it honestly in front of the God who was already working on it before you ever asked. Father, we come to you tonight, tired of waiting on things we cannot make move any faster. Some of us have been asking for the same breakthrough for so long that we've nearly stopped believing it's coming. The job we still don't have, the pregnancy we're still hoping for, the relationship we're still praying will be restored. We confess that in the silence, we've started keeping score, wondering if the delay means you've forgotten what we asked. Teach us tonight what you taught Abraham and Sarah, that a promise doesn't expire just because the years keep passing. Some of us have tried to force our own timeline into being, the way Sarah once did, reaching for a shortcut instead of trusting your pace. Forgive us for the ways we've tried to manufacture an answer ourselves out of sheer impatience. The corners we've cut, the doors we've forced open that you never actually opened for us. Give us instead the kind of patience that can hold a promise for 25 years if it has to, without letting go of it and without twisting it into something it was never meant to be. Lord, some of us are watching our own bodies, our own bank accounts, our own circumstances grow less and less likely to produce the thing we're praying for. The same way Abraham and Sarah watched their bodies age past the point of possibility. When the natural evidence stacks up against your promise, remind us that you were never limited by what looked possible from where we were standing. For those of us in a season that feels like nothing but obscurity right now, tending sheep in a wilderness nobody's watching, doing work that feels far beneath what we hoped our lives would look like by now, remind us of Moses. 40 years is a long time to feel forgotten in the desert, but it was never wasted, and neither is this. Whatever skill, whatever patience, whatever quiet character you are building in us right now while nobody's applauding, Let us trust that you are preparing us for a door we cannot yet see the shape of. Strip away in us whatever impatience or self-reliance got us into difficulty in the first place, the way the wilderness stripped that same impulsiveness out of Moses, so that whenever the assignment finally comes, we're actually ready to carry it. Lord, some of us feel trapped exactly the way Israel did at the edge of that sea. An obstacle in front of us we cannot get around, and pressure closing in behind us that won't let us go back either. We don't know how to stand still when everything in us wants to run, or fight, or fix it ourselves tonight. Teach us what it means to actually be silent and watch you work, trusting that the parting you promised may already be underway in the dark, long before we're able to see the first dry patch of ground. Quiet the part of us that wants to negotiate, or panic, or take matters into our own hands the moment the pressure builds, and give us the strange, steady courage it takes to simply stand still. We think of Habakkuk climbing his watchtower simply to wait, refusing to walk away from his post even when the answer didn't come immediately. Give us that same stubborn patience for the specific things some of us have been asking you about for months, maybe years now. The diagnosis we're still waiting to understand. The child we're still praying will come home. The marriage we're still hoping will heal. Let us take our stand and keep watching, believing that your timing, even when it feels unbearably slow, has never once been late. We don't need the exact date. We simply want the confidence to keep our post through one more quiet season, trusting the appointment is real even without the calendar in hand. And for the ones running low right now, watching the flour in the jar get closer to the bottom, watching the savings account, or the energy, or the hope itself thin out day by day, meet us the way you met that widow in Zarephath. We're not asking for a warehouse tonight. We're asking for today's portion, enough to make it through today, trusting that the jar will not run dry before the famine actually ends. Let us stop dreading tomorrow's need before it even arrives, and let us receive today's provision as evidence, not proof of scarcity, but proof that you are still faithfully measuring out exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. Some of us have simply grown weary, Lord, not of you, but of the waiting itself. Renew us the way only you can. Where we've been running on empty, restore real strength, not the kind we manufacture through sheer determination, but the kind that comes from actually resting in you while we wait. Let us rise the way eagles rise, not by flapping harder, but by catching a current that was already there, already lifting, long before we noticed we were being carried. For every one of us still checking a phone that hasn't rung, still standing at a door that hasn't opened, still watching a jar that isn't empty yet but isn't full either, meet us tonight with exactly the strength this specific day requires, no more and no less. We ask this in the name of Jesus, who himself waited 30 hidden years before his public ministry ever began, who asked his Father in Gethsemane for the timeline to change and then trusted the answer he was given instead. Amen. Before we close tonight, carry these words with you. Genesis 21:5. The promise Abraham and Sarah waited 25 years for arrived exactly when God had planned it, not a day early or a day late. Exodus 14:14. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to be still. Habakkuk 2:3. If it seems slow, wait for it, because it will surely come and it will not delay. 1 Kings 17:16. The jar of flour did not run out day after day for as long as the famine lasted. And above all of it, hold on to Isaiah 40:31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Notice what that verse doesn't promise. It doesn't promise the waiting will be short. It promises that the waiting itself, given to God instead of fought against, becomes the very thing that renews you. It doesn't say those who wait will simply survive. It says they will mount up, run, and walk without fainting. 3 different paces for 3 different seasons of the same waiting, and strength enough for every one of them. If tonight's word found you in the exact middle of your own waiting season, tell us below what you're standing watch for right now. Sometimes speaking it out loud is the first step toward trusting God with it fully. Send this to someone you know who's still holding on for an answer that hasn't come yet. And if a reminder like this would help you keep watching instead of giving up, stay close to this channel, because there's another word here for the next long night of waiting too. Whatever door you're still watching tonight, friend, it has not been forgotten. Stand still a little longer. Something is already moving.